All right, everyone, welcome back. So we, in our previous lecture, discussed specifically differences between organic molecules and inorganic molecules. And what we're going to be talking about now is really how the molecules come together to create life, and the different molecules that are important to life. So the biggest and most important molecules that we're going to be discussing are macromolecules. So these are going to be large organic molecules. So again, organic molecules referring to molecules that have that carbon backbone and have at least one carbon-hydrogen bond. So these macromolecules are composed of these subunits, and these are called monomers. When monomers link together, they form polymer chains. Again, this is just sort of some definitions that we need to sort of be able to have it in our vocabulary to start to discuss the different reactions that are going to be characterizing life and the important processes that happen within a cell. So there are really only four types of complex macromolecules that make up living things. And those are carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. And if you recall from our previous lectures looking at the formation of life on Earth, these were the types of uh, units of life that we were able to sort of look at when scientists were looking at that primordial soup, when they were recreating the chemistry of early Earth, and they were able to create these nucleic acids and these basic macromolecules that make up all living things. So what I want to spend some time on is going through these different molecules of life. So we're going to start with carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are made up of sugar monomers. So basically, carbohydrates are made up of monosaccharides. So we have monomers and then sugar to get the word monosaccharides. So an important monosaccharide is glucose. And again, this is what is powering a lot of the energy in cellular organisms. And carbohydrates are really just that. They are energy storing molecules, and are critical for both the structural support of cells and also things like digestion, things like anything that's sort of requiring direct energy for a cellular process. You're going to need carbohydrates. So you can see here we have a simple carbohydrate where we have really just this monosaccharide backbone that is, in this case, formed in a ring for glucose. And then we have complex carbohydrates where we have multiple monosaccharides coming together to be bonded and creating these complex carbohydrates. So ultimately, when we're talking about carbohydrates, we're talking about strands of sugar, is at its very chemical basis. Okay, so next up we have proteins. So proteins are made up, again, we're talking about these different monomers, in this case, amino acids. There are 20 different amino acids that are found in proteins, but each of them sort of share this core structure where we have some sort of amino group, which again is sort of like this um, some sort of nitrogen paired group, and then a carboxyl group. So they all sort of share this base structure. And what a protein is it's a linear strand of these amino acids, and the type of amino acid that is listed uh, creates these folds that we see in proteins. And it's ultimately these folds that allow a protein to function properly. Um, and so proteins are critical for in cells because they dictate the rate of different chemical reactions that are happening within a cell. They also sort of are responsible for moving um, different nutrients through a cell, and they can also even propel a cell in terms of movement, and they're very important for flagella, for example. So what's critical here is that these amino acids make up proteins, and that these amino acids create the folding and structure of proteins, which then are able to regulate the different rate of chemical reactions that are occurring within a cell. The next molecule of life that we're going to talk about are nucleic acids. And these are made out of nucleotide monomers. Again, understanding these different monomers and what makes up these critical molecules of life is something that I want you all to be able to understand. So there are two types of nucleic acid, DNA and RNA, and each of which is made up of slightly different types of a nucleotide. So when we're talking about RNA, we're talking about these single linear one-chain bonded nucleotides, and then DNA, where we have this two-strand and two chains of nucleotides that are bonded and twisted into a helical shape. So just like we talked about with our last molecule of life, they all sort of share this same base structure where we have this sugar at the core, some sort of phosphate group, and then a base. And that is sort of what makes up these different chains that create our base unit of RNA and DNA. And we're going to get more in depth, obviously, in the structure of DNA and RNA. But what's important for us to know now is that DNA and RNA are essentially the script and genetic instructions that a cell uses to both create, reproduce, and transform energy. And these structures are really responsible for that script and for the generation of different proteins that are created by the cell. So our last molecule that we're going to be discussing today are lipids. So unlike what we've seen with our previous structures and molecules, lipids are not made of repeating monomers. Instead, what's really critical to know about lipids is that they're all hydrophobic molecules. So hydro meaning water and phobic meaning fear of, so that they are not water loving. They are hydrophobic molecules, so they don't mix with water. And their structures can vary quite a lot. So for example, we have, hang on, I live near a firehouse. Okay, fire engine has passed by. So when we're talking about different lipids, again, we're talking about all these different hydrophobic substances. So these are some of the big, main, important ones that when we're talking about lipids. The first one being fatty acids, where they have this long carbon backbone bonded to one another with hydrogen. And when we have saturated versus unsaturated, we have this kink. We have this double bonded carbon that is in there, and that's what allows something to become saturated or unsaturated. Next, we have triglycerides. So this is where we have a glycerol, and then we have these fatty acid chains that hang off of it. And this is really important because this is what provides large amounts of energy, and as well as padding and thermal insulation for different cellular processes. Next, we have cholesterol. Again, a really important lipid that's really important for cell membranes. And then lastly, and what we're going to be talking more specifically about this lipid, we have phospholipid.